Ladies and gentlemen, welcome in to episode 14 of the podcast. I know, 14. It's been, it's been pretty good. It's been pretty good. We got 14 episodes. This will be the 14th, rather, 13 under our belt. And this is going to be the similar amount of quality. It's good to see you. Those of you that are hearing me post-fact will be not understanding who I'm talking to unless I tell you. So we're going to be talking to members of the chat. I'm doing this live on Twitch. You want to come over to twitch.tv/Lorumirth. Check me out. Open up a browser, type in loru.tv. That's how it goes. Now that's been said, those of you in chat, hello. Aaron, Cherry, Chandra, Saren, Forbidden Love, it's good to see you. I know Zach VG's in there. How you doing? How you doing, everybody? It's good to have you. Good to have you. I think I said Forbidden Love. I did. Aaron, welcome in. Aaron, thanks for the host. Cherry, thanks for the host. You're helping us grow. Appreciate that. So Killer, welcome in. We're having a live podcast, buddy. We're going to be discussing the last year and the beta that was last weekend. So I've had some time to think. I got some notes here. We're going to be discussing it. Kachara says he's talking to himself. Don't let him lie to you. It's really funny. Chip, welcome in, buddy. We're going to be discussing last year right now. So let's dive in. Now, how this is going to work. If I see, go ahead and type in chat, my friends. If you have a point that is particularly fantastic, I'll say it now, and we'll discuss it during this podcast, and you'll be able to be featured on the things. Now, if you're listening to us post-fact, you're probably just hearing the audio. If you want to see the video live, I have already said you can come to Twitch and see it live. If you didn't catch the live video, only patrons get this video post it being live. So make sure you head on over to our Patreon. There's links in our YouTube, links on all the podcast platforms, so that if you want to see the video live. Now, without further ado, let's dive in. The last year. This was a massive success, in my opinion. If you take nothing else from this podcast, this game, it was great. A massive success. It was so good. It was enjoyable. It was entertaining. It was a delight, and I can see this being our go-to game for co-streams, for solos, for viewer games. It was great. That is the top level. Okay, thoroughly enjoyable, fantastic job. Hats off to the devs for putting on, just hyping it up correctly, giving out keys to streamers. They gave the content creators. I got my key from a content creator distribution list, and they gave me extra keys to give to y'all without me even saying anything. So thank you to the devs for doing that. I really, really appreciate that. So it's a massive success. The devs of Elastic Games should be proud, extremely proud, especially how Jay, the head developer, the head community manager, you handled everything very well, bud. You really did. Jay was extremely personable when we met him and the team at PAX East this past PAX East. If that doesn't sound like a tongue twister, imagine this. I could have said at last year's PAX East, we played last year. That's gets all kinds of crazy. So, top level, fantastic. Now, let's talk about some things, pros and cons. But before I get there, we're going to have some caveats, some things that do, thanks, Chandra, yes. some things that do not make the pros and cons list because mainly of it being a beta, okay? First and foremost, the queue times. The queue times during the beta, this was an extremely closed, welcome in Deadly Text, and we're having a live podcast right now, buddy. It's good to see you. These queue times were not reflective of live because this was an extremely closed beta. Very limited amount of player base was reflected on this current beta that it'll be so much larger at launch. This was, again, only content creators and community members of the content creators and devs. That's really it. There were some contests that were done. They did some more keys. They launched some more keys throughout the weekend, but queue times were still pretty good. It was a little bit less than 5 minutes, I felt like, on some of the longer queue times, but most of the time we just dove right in. There was no question. There was no wait. So it was very nice. And this is me dying, chat. Goodness gracious. So there was no wait time whatsoever, even if there was some wait time. Very, very little. Second caveat are the game crashes. Because this is a beta, I expect some, not optimal things happening. I think in the 3 days that we played, the game really only crashed 3, maybe 4 times. It really didn't crash that much. So there was really no lag, really no crashes, and the queues were pretty fast considering the limited amount of people that were playing during the beta. So again, hats off to the devs. They did a fantastic job. So those are the caveats. Let's talk about some cons. Let's talk about some cons first. Okay, number one, one of the first things I had to say was a bit of a problem with the game was the hitboxes, and this could have been for a number of issues. I don't know if this is the exact way to describe this hitboxes, but this is what it felt like. So, for example, on a playing the killer, you would go to swipe, you'd go to grab, you would go to slash, and you couldn't really plan your hitboxes because everything, it felt like you were slashing way super close to your model, but way super close to your character, and I felt like I couldn't connect stuff when it should have. It looked like it should have, but it didn't. And the same thing with survivors. If you had a melee weapon, a non-ranged weapon, and you went to go slash, you really just, sometimes stuff was just far enough away that it felt like it should hit, but it didn't. So I'm not sure if that was a latency issue, a lag issue, or whether it was a hitbox, but it didn't feel super fun to grab and then just air when I was like, wasn't it right in front of me? I'm not really sure. So that's my first point. Second point, the taser. The taser that the survivors have. So I have two things about the taser. Number one, the game starts with the taser, just kind of spawned in. This is a 25 scrap, I believe it was 25 scrap item. This was the like top tier thing to go get. You had to have at least one medic that would make a taser, right? You start the game with it. So you start the game with this really, really good item. It was around a 3-second stun. I don't remember the exact timings, but I couldn't really test that, but couldn't do that. I kited a lot of killers by just bunny hopping around, says Hannum. This is kind of the point. Is that intended? I'm not entirely sure. And that kind of goes back to the hitbox thing, right? Like, if just jumping is all it takes to dodge a killer, swiping at you, or vice versa, if just jumping is all it takes for a survivor to dodge a killer, I don't really like that. I want there to be counterplay involved, not not cheap tactics, right? This isn't Dead by Daylight. We're not going to just have one method of getting away, pallets. We're going to have a variety of ways. That's what the last year was introducing. So excellent point, Hannum. Excellent point. This taser, 3-second stun. Way too long, and it even did damage. This was so much about it was so good, they have to nerf it in some way, and whether it's less durability, so less time on the stun, no damage, I would settle for don't start the game with the taser. Or here's my little meat in between thing, have it so the tool that spawns at the start of the game is random. Don't make it the taser every single time, because you can plan around that. Make it so there's crazy fun games for the survivors where, oh, hey, look, we spawned in with a flamethrower. Hey, we spawned in with the taser. Awesome. Hey, this time we spawned in with pain pills. This time we spawned in with, maybe the helmet for the, the assault class. The assault class could craft helmets, something like that. It adds more replayability and more crazy fun moments without being unfair. I say quote unfair every single time because the taser did not have a lot of durability, but a 3-second stun with a coordinated team, it was an unfun experience as a killer, whenever I play the killer. So do something to the taser as my second con. Something has to be done. So Hennum says, I wasn't getting away, but if the killer didn't stop chasing me, my teammates just put him in the dirt. Exactly. Chip says, make taser have charges instead of a bar. I think strangler range is lower than assault pipe. Yeah, so 2 great points, Chip. 2 great points. An interesting way to balance the taser. Instead of having one big bar, maybe have the same amount of time, but break it up into, you have to reload the taser, right? So maybe instead of 1 3-second stun, make it 3 1-second stuns, just to throw out an idea. And that's a great point, Chip. Exactly. And I think that's intended, the strangler having less range than the pipe. That makes sense. Having the bare hands of the strangler have less range than a pipe. But make that part of the game, make that implicit, make it so certain weapons have certain range. So that way it's like, oh, are we having issues, with the giant, and we want to stay a little bit farther from him? Okay, let's get some farther away weapons like the baseball bat or the pipe, as opposed to, I don't know, whatever a close range survivor weapon is. I'm not really sure. So I think maybe some items crafting should be character bound. The nerd gets the taser, Chad gets the bat, for example. That's interesting. I like how they did. And that's Hennum says that. I like how they took the characters and made them the literal voice acted Chad versus Amber versus Sam. And there was, I think Nick was the nerdy one. And then I think Troy was the football player, right? I think. Yeah. So those were I think those were all 5. I don't know if I missed one. Anyway, I liked how the characters were cosmetic focused. I like that the classes get these certain items. I understand your point, Hannah, that like maybe Nick gets the taser and then Chad gets the bat, but then that adds another level of complexity and balance. I'd much rather, we already have a really good, and I'm gonna get to why balance is one of the pros here. I'm gonna get to that. I don't agree that the characters should have specific items. I like the class-based balance, and so all inclusive. That way, like someone can play Sam and be a technician, or someone else can play Sam and be Assault, and that's just what they like to do. So I think that's better. But that's just me. I like your idea, Hannah. I'm just saying I like mine too. You know what I'm saying? Chip says, because the taser, the way it's used, you just tap the animation to reset the killer. Exactly. And then the charges should be like tap use. You can't just animation cancel. So that was one of the big problems, I think, is that exactly if the killer was ready to go take somebody out, if they were in the middle of a kill animation, you would be able to stop them by just, as Chip says, tapping the taser. You're not even really using the stun to stun. You're using it to animation cancel. And is that intended? Because that's okay if that's intended. If that's like another way to counterplay the killer. But then the killer should have some way. Maybe we're going to reduce the killer's, the animation it takes to actually remove somebody from a game. Who knows? We'll see. So exactly, Chip. Yeah. So good points in chat all around so far. But that's one of my big cons is the taser. You can see it's getting some discussion. So Texan, welcome back, buddy. It's good to have you. So my third con and my final con is the ambush spots. And you heard me talk about this. Saren, I see your point. I will be talking about that. Yes. I will be responding to that. The ambush points, to me, yes, there's going to be more maps. But here's what good PvP sounds like. Okay, here's what good PvP gameplay sounds like. Okay. The killer has a one-shot ability, but it's high risk, high reward. Okay. That's what the ambush spots are, those. But because the survivors know exactly where the ambush spots are, every match, every time they go into the high school map, they know exactly where they are. It is now plannable. And while I'm not saying good PvP can't be plannable, I'm saying that there has to be some element of randomness when it comes to those kind of things, high risk, high reward. It is unfun for me to, that's where I'm coming from. It's an unfun game type to say, okay, I'm going to play the slasher. Once I play the slasher, you heard the game talking like, okay, watch out for skylights. Well, which skylights? All of them. Because all of them proc. What if only some of them proc? What if the ambush spots cycle not just per map, but per game? So we know that the last year devs have said there's going to be a couple maps at launch besides the high school map, right? Well, if on the high school, there's always the set ambush spots at a set location every single time, then eventually from bottom to top, people are going to figure out where these are and they're just going to avoid them wholesale. Now, did people forget sometimes? And are there ways you can plan around them knowing exactly where the ambush spots are? Sure, you can take the giant and throw somebody at an ambush spot and jump up into it and then murder them immediately. Sure, those things exist. I'm simply saying that it feels one-dimensional. Something that is so unique and so interesting that there's an ambush spot, a place where you can, it's very PogChamp on both sides. It's like, if you're a killer and you get it, you're like, oh yeah, that's great. If you're a survivor, like, oh no, it's like the worst. So it is absolutely there needs to be some level of randomness, I think, to bring the element of surprise back into it to make it more fun. That is the ambush spots. So, sorry, chat's been blowing up while I've been talking about this. Ambush spots are one of my cons. So, Saren says, maybe like it starts at 0 charges, needs X charges to fire, and you can, when it's used, discharges fully, locking you in the killer and sending action. Who knows, Saren? Exactly. They have to do something to balance the taser, exactly, because it's at its current form, it is too strong in my opinion. So Chip says you can force some animations to happen based on where you're standing from the down. And that's the other thing. Like the models of them, this kind of goes back to the hitbox thing. The animations I think need a little bit of touching up, but that wasn't so much of a con to me. The hitboxes itself were a con, but the animations themselves, I'm not so sure on. I'm going to have to play the game more to have an opinion on the animations. So nice, Adam. Nice. Chip says, I feel like the ambush spots are a cool thing for the first few times you play. Now it's more like, don't stand there. Exactly. And that's exactly my point. And when you figure them out, it's like, oh, this is really tight. And then at a high level, it becomes, I know exactly where not to go. And that's not good PvP. Good PvP is, I think there's an ambush spot here. The killer hasn't used it yet. Let's avoid it just in case. but then person B says, I haven't seen him use it. I haven't seen him go in. I don't think it spawned this round, assuming in my example that the ambush spots are respawning and changing positions, right, per game. Like, but let's just try to push through it for time's sake, and they chance it, right? So again, it's a high risk. It becomes another high risk, high reward, but on the survivor side, right? So that kind of stuff is what I'm talking about. So Chip continues to say, I would like to see ambush spots be used without actually having to have someone there, so it can be used as an engagement point rather than a kill point. That's interesting. Maybe they'll have ambush spots with certain strategies like that. Like maybe they'll have a killer whose kit is like remote ambush spots, like can place a trap, like literally trapper, and then maybe instead of just trapping them, it like takes them out. Who knows? Trapper from a DBD. Henham talks about proximity mics are needed. I definitely agree. 100% agree. I think if they're going for this all voice kind of thing, you know what I'm saying? Glad you like it, Tex. I'm really glad you like it. It's good. I think this voice comms things where they're kind of doing it Rainbow Six style, where everybody can hear everybody at all times. And I think they might have wanted it to be proximity mics, but the range was too broad. So like I could hear somebody in the basement in a corner with one way in, one way out from the gym as killer. I don't know if that was intended, because there's definite points where you can hear people as the killer, but you could for 95% of the map, right? So exactly, chat. Chat's got some great points here, some fantastic points. So Jerry says, I also think they need to allow for the muting of specific players. This was actually huge, and it didn't make my con list, but I think they should. It's not a super pressing thing, I think, but eventually, yes. I'm more about like game-breaking stuff. Having comms that you can either mute all or enable all, that's enough for me. If people are being stupid, I can just mute everybody. Well, at least we have the option to mute everybody, is what I'm saying. But Cherry, I definitely agree. You should do the Rainbow Six version of this, where specific players, is this guy or girl being toxic? Mute them, right? I think that's down the line. I definitely think they're going to need something like that, especially if they're integrating voice fully to this game. Chip says there's no range to proxy mics. I'm pretty sure dead players can talk to living, killer per survivor, vice versa. There was definite points in the map where I couldn't hear them speaking, where as I came around a corner, all of a sudden, in the middle of a conversation, I could hear things. Maybe they just started talking. Who knows? So chat's got some really good points here. Love it. My biggest cons are the hitboxes. They didn't feel like they reached correctly. The taser, look at it in some way. We had some great examples from chat and from myself. And finally, the ambush spots, I feel like have a lack of counterplay, and they feel unfun. I think they're a great idea, but there just needs to be just a little more to it, and a little variation. Now, and I honestly agree with Cherry that they're going to need mics at some point. I think I'm changing my mind and adding that onto my cons, because that's going to happen. It's guaranteed that someone at some point is going to be toxic, right? So you might as well have that. So I think you mean exactly, Texan, exactly. I don't want to say the words you used because, the podcast. But it's fine. We're good. Now for my pros, chat. We already talked about how the game was an overarching success for the beta. I want to focus on a couple key things. Number one, the game was smooth. Very little tearing, very little FPS drops. I was on 60 FPS for most of the day, if not all of the day. It felt really, really good to play. It was very smooth. I could turn effectively. The balance was nice. I really enjoyed the game, top level. So that's a massive pro there for me. The gameplay was really smooth. It didn't feel like the graphics needed to be super turned up, so you can play this game on a really not so high-end PC and still have fun with your buddy. So that's my first pro, is the game was very smooth. Second thing I really liked was the scalable kits of the survivors. Okay, so in most games like this, most class-based games, you think of a class-based game, you think Overwatch. Okay, this game was more like League of Legends, where you start with a kit and outline a skeleton, and then over time it increases and gets up and running, and you get more and more. So the technician starts with just being able to barricade doors and placing a kind of crappy turret. Endgame, the technician can have a freaking, a shotgun? Oh man, was that the shot? I think that was the technician. Was the scout the flamethrower? I don't remember who got the flamethrower, but yeah, so you were able to tech up this different things. So I really liked that. I think they should look, and this is going to happen, I'm sure, at some balance on what you keep on death when you are playing round to round, right? So in the round, if I play technician and I'm killed, I lose all my upgrades. I don't think you should lose all the upgrades. I think you should lose some so that dying still feels like, oh god, this is the worst, right? I don't think you should lose all of it, though, if you stay as the class you died as, right? So if I am playing as Technician, die, and then switch to Scout, restart me. Restart my kit. That sounds good to me. But if I'm playing as Technician, die, continue as Technician, let me keep some of the scrap at the very least. Someone said this idea where you keep all the, or half, let's say, some number between none and all of your scrap, but you still have to go find a crafting kit. So it's like just a little bit of an extra step to be able to craft the stuff you were back up to. I don't know the proper system that should be with these scalable kits. I think they're already kind of hearing some outcry from the community on this, on the classes that are the survivors and scaling them up. But overall, I really enjoyed the scalable aspect of those. I think it adds to the replayability 100%. So Saren says, my only problem was hit reg loading into games, and that is what you get for not released yet and not played. Exactly. And I actually touched on the queue, not the queue times. We're gonna talk about. I did touch on queue times. We're going to talk about matchmaking specifically in just a moment. But yes, I don't. Queue times are one of those caveats. Exactly. Flamethrower was the turret class. Okay, so the Flamethrower was the Technician. Thank you. So I think the Scout was the shotgun then. Okay, so scalable kit's great. My third and fourth pro is this was a really excellent PvP game in terms of high and low level play. Game had an extremely low skill floor, so you could just install the game with your buddies, be brand new, jump in, have a great time. That's the mark of a really interesting and fun game. But at the same time, the high level play, the where and when you really start min-maxing, like at what time frame what game state am I using Giant versus versus Slasher? At what game state should I really push for the shotgun versus going for upgrading my other parts of my kit, right? You can really get some nice customizable builds. You can really have solo builds. You can have team builds. There's some extremely far out top level, high level play. So the people that are playing games like Dead by Daylight, that they're playing thousands of hours, where all their high level play is pallet looping correctly. To me, that's the equivalent of, well, I'm not going to say what I was going to say. It doesn't resonate with me. Let's just put it that way. It doesn't feel like there's enough there. Okay. In this game, in last year, there's so much you can do at a high level play. And then there's going to be a meta, and then there's going to be a shift in the meta, and then we have to relearn the shifts, and we have to adapt. And all of this is great. This is the mark of a great PvP game, something that has an ebb and a flow at a high level and has planning involved to the builds and to the meta, while still being able to pick it up with your buddies, say, hey, let's play last year, and then we can all just have a great time. So there's really low floor skill floor, really high skill ceiling is what I'm trying to say. So that's what I'm saying, chat. Chip says you can hold scrap and die and then tech up on another class. Really, I didn't know that. I did not know that. You could keep your scrap and then go to another class. That kind of changes how I think about things. Maybe you start as one class, maybe you start as the assault class just cause, bully the killer a little bit, stock up on scrap, switch over to medic, get the taser. That's interesting. So, okay, cool. The final pro I have is the matchmaking. Really interesting how they're doing the matchmaking, where it is dedicated servers. So how it works is you queue up for a game. There is 3 options. You can find game, host game, and find server. So Quick Match prioritizes games that aren't full for survivors. This is huge. This means if in games like Dead by Daylight and Friday the 13th, if someone left, this was detrimental to the entire experience. Like we've all been there where we've been playing DBD and you load into the game from the get-go and someone dropped. So now it's 3v1 and the killer's probably going to wipe your team because you have that much more lack of presence, right? 4 people versus 3 people. In last year, if someone leaves for whatever reason, the game is going to prioritize the quick queue to auto-fill those single and double and however many spots. That's really great. Hats off to the devs there. That's really going to help the longevity of the game and the replayability and the really good emotion, I guess is the best way to put it, from the people playing the game. It's not going to be as frustrating when, even if there's long queue times, which I don't think there's going to be at launch for reasons that I'm going to get into in just a moment. Even if there's long queue times, it won't matter because you'll be able to jump into a match and then someone will leave, maybe, and then you can just refill it. So the matchmaking, the auto queue system, fantastic. Second thing about matchmaking is that you can actually host a game. You could say, I'm going to host a game, and it's not kill your friends. It's not some like, everything is unlocked mode where everybody is super OP and they can like slap on all the epic add-ons. No, it's just like it's a normal game, but you're hosting it and people can join you. This is for streamers. This is for people who want to play with their friends. This is for the community. This is for us. This is so I can go in and host a game, and you best believe this is exactly what we're going to do, chat. I'm going to host a game and go, okay, subs, come on down. Like, here we go. I don't know if there's a password or whatnot. I think there needs to be some kind of password. DT, welcome in, buddy. We're having a live podcast. It's good to see you. I think there should be some kind of way to lock your lobby so that you can only have certain people access it. That's something I would like to have. Maybe that'll come out eventually. Who knows? For now, though, that hosting is going to be really great if you want to play with your buds. You can drop into a lobby. This is similar to Dead by Daylight. I think DBD has like the same kind of thing, but it is, I think it's better in last year. I think their execution of it is better in the last year. Welcome in there, Super. We're talking about the last year beta that just happened last week, so that was a lot of fun. Now, the biggest thing I want to focus on the matchmaking is how they're choosing to go about helping the queue times. And this is going to, again, add to the longevity of the game, that when you host a game, go into a game, and then the game finishes, the game doesn't just scatter all the players to the wind and say, find another queue. It keeps you in the same queue with the same people. So if no one wants to leave, you can just ready right back up and just dive back in. And that plays into the random killer aspect too. Like maybe so-and-so, maybe person A was killer and got a really good game. Person B is like, oh, I could have done so much better. And they're like, they're talking shit and doing all that stuff, right? Person B is like, oh, I could do so much better. Well, have him, says person A. You try. They're in the same lobby. They don't have to try to find each other. You're just there, and you're ready to go. So I think that's a really interesting lobby thing. I think it's a really good way to encourage replayability and encourage camaraderie in your community, right? So as a streamer, that makes me very happy, because when I go into a match in a game like Dead by Daylight, and we're going to be comparing these games to each other a lot because they're the same freaking genre, chat, so that's what's going to happen. So if I go into a lobby with Dead by Daylight and we finish it, well, then we have to find each other again in survivors and killers, right? The same survivors are not going to fight the same killers, right? It's because it's two separate lobbies. They've homogenized the lobbies. They've made it so you keep your team from game to game. Unless one or two people can leave, sure. But the majority of your lobby is going to stick together, and that's a great thing. So welcome in, Waffle. Microtransactions possible, says Waffle. Yeah, actually, they've said on their Twitter that they would like to add cosmetics. They would like to add specifically things you can purchase, things you can buy, something like that. So what's up, Race? Welcome in. Tell me, buddy. We are talking about last year, but Waffle, yes, I do think they will add microtransactions in the near future. I think I have no problem with those. I have absolutely no problem with those. I have no problem with a game putting in place something that is not pay to win. Like if it's hey, give us $3 and you start with the bat, or give us $3 and your assault class starts with the helmet on. That's a no-no. And if they ever do that, you best believe I'll be the first one to say we're not playing this game anymore, because that's not good. That's not good at all. But if it's, hey, give us $1 and Sam's hair is red now, or Amber has a different color skirt, or Troy's leather jacket, I think it was a leather jacket, is like a little bit more crisper, like a different color, something like that. Those are great. Those are great ways to support the developers. And why those are so good from a company standpoint is because when you buy a game, that's the single point of monetization, right? After the game is bought, that player base that is constantly playing their game, the company is paying for upkeep of the servers, of the new content, and sure, the new content, you can pay for that, but it really helps out the studio and the developers to put some kind of monetization in place for the players that are already playing the game. And I'm not talking about paid expansions. I'm talking like some day-to-day stuff, right? Cosmetic microtransactions are fine. That's great. So, Race, thank you, buddy. Appreciate that. Thanks very much. Saren says, pay money to start with scrap. That would ruin the game. That's some Star Wars Battlefront stuff. That's John, no, thank you. Everybody, literally the entire chat is like, cosmetics are great. So, exactly correct. So, chat, that's really all I had on last year. Top to bottom, game was fantastic. I'm very excited to play more of it. I think the balance is pretty good right now. It's on a it's a little good. I kind of say it like that. It feels like it's more 53-47. I don't think we should be discussing balance until the first month of the game, at least in depth, until the first month of the game is released and we see the vast majority of people playing. Why? And this is my final point. PvP games, you have to let a meta present itself, be countered, because who knows, maybe like people were already talking about this on the final day, like, oh, yeah, 2 assault is really the move. Oh yeah, 1 medic, that's probably the way. Maybe don't start with a medic, maybe go into it 10 minutes in, because then you hit. This is we have to let that kind of stuff present itself and let the meta be able to be countered, because without that, if we're just starting to nerf stuff left and right, the only thing I think we need to nerf is the taser. I think it's just way out of left field. It's too much. But the rest of it, let's feel it out. Let's play the game. Let's have a good time. Let's see what's focus on things that are frustrating and unfun first. And that, my friends, is all I got about the last year. Now, this episode is going to be our 14th podcast episode. This is technically an episode of The Ball Game. You all know that whenever we talk about game strategy, top-level game stuff, it is under that moniker, The Ball Game. You can look for this podcast soon, my friends. This has been another episode of the Sanctum Sessions podcast. If you enjoyed the content, make sure to follow or subscribe on all the big platforms. We're on all of them. This podcast is supported by our Patreon. Head over to patreon.loru.tv for exclusive podcast rewards. Once again, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time.